Jason. It's a pleasure to have you here speaking to Equities TV from the NEBA conference.
Thank you so much for having me.
Jason, tell us about your company, its mission, and you're one of the co-founders. Tell us about the problem it's solving.
So Atlantic WeedBoard came out of just this epiphany that there were 112 million people living on the East Coast of the United States that was about to all in the next 3 to 5 years have access to cannabis in a variety and multitude of different products. And there was absolutely no information for them about how to choose between those products or how they might dose or how they might use what was in it for them. On the West Coast, you could call that a mature market. California legalized in 1997, and Washington, Oregon, Colorado, in the years after. The truth is that in these medical areas, they are often as ignorant as the East Coast is. That part of cannabis, the medical part of it, for many people, that information hasn't filtered down yet. They may know that there are medical benefits, but to figure out whether there's efficacy for what is wrong with you or someone that can be a little hard to access. And that's really what we want to make easier and more. Um, one of my jobs, showbiz jobs, was working for Dr. Phil. I spent 5 years working for Dr. Phil. And what I did for him was those little film pieces that you see right before they sit down with him, just like a 2.5 minute package, shot at their house that tells you everything you need to know. People didn't necessarily get helped by being on the Dr. Phil show, but they got really helped by the message boards that were part of it. So all of a sudden, what they felt was embarrassing or something they couldn't discuss became something that other people would congratulate them for being brave enough to admit to on TV, acknowledge that they felt the same thing. And there was just this camaraderie. Really, what the Atlantic Weed Board is I'm a community organizer, right? One of the first interviews I did, I was talking to somebody and, I was debating whether I was going to use an alias, an avatar. And this guy's a guy who runs Heady Vermont, which is a lobbying organization for cannabis in Vermont. And he said, I just had to come to a moment where I had to be honest with myself that I've been using this plant and been a fan of this plant for most of my life. And I've been embarrassed about that for most of my life, ashamed. And that even for people who liked it, there was still a stigma. And that really resonated within me. I know that in my world, there are many people I know who probably have a relationship with the plant, but we've never spoken about it. And for good reason a lot of times. If you have kids, for a long time, they would take your kids away if it came out, right? This is not,
Yeah,
you
and
know,
so I mean, clearly, there's a lot that you try to uncover with this media company. Can you explain how you've used your professional showbiz background, your experience as a producer and as a director, to start a company and create a platform that is both educational and has that entertainment appeal? What was the vision behind really developing this new concept? And you talked about it, I think, from a macro standpoint in terms of the Northeast. But what have you found now on this journey? It's been almost a year since you started the company.
well, I think the main thing is something I already knew, which is that if you let people tell their stories, there's great healing, not only in them being able to tell their story, but in other people being able to take that story in. And, the human body, marvelous and unique in its own way, but the truth is the one thing you never want to hear from a doctor is him saying, well, I never saw that before, right? We're all kind of the same. Pretty much everything we've had, some other human has had before. And oftentimes we may know things about our body, but without really um, being able to know whether it's changeable. So, just for example, me, I smoked cannabis for a long, long time, and also I was born with a hiatal hernia. That's where your esophagus meets your stomach. I belched and gurgled and made noises my whole life, and it was embarrassing. And any doctor would say, "Oh, you know what? The surgery is way worse than the symptoms. Just live with it." Just live with it. And then I had a friend who got cancer, and I was going back and forth from California a lot. This is early aughts, and her doctor told her to take CBD oil and pills or cannabis oil. And, I thought, well, if she's taking that with lung cancer, then perhaps I should be taking that without it. And all my gurgling stopped overnight. I didn't know it could.
So there's a lot of benefits with the products, the cannabis oils you mentioned, and your platform is a way of kind of presenting some of these products to the market and creating broader awareness.
So, like,
Can
we
you
have a
explain
show
how you
called,
do that?
so this is where being a Renaissance person really helps. So, all my life, I have been a writer, director, producer, editor. And frankly, it's been a problem because the Renaissance mind for a long time was not really appreciated. They wanted people who would specify, and they wanted you to hire and farm out. And as a creative person, that often dilutes a vision. So when I did Behind the Music, I did everything, and they let me just go off and do everything. But
And to your point, it works in certain industries, and it definitely works when you're a CEO that has a vision. So it seems like you've been able to parlay that in this platform.
so in this case, where money is tight, the lovely thing is that, so as we built this, the knowing that I could create a great deal of video content, edit it in my house, in my little office, put it up as a platform. So about 8 weeks ago, we went up on Instagram. We're closing in on 4,000 people. I think in another 10 weeks we'll be at 10,000. And it what I've found is that people are so hungry for this, so hungry for information, and particularly hungry to hear it from people in their own words, no artifice, human. The other thing is Instagram, right?
Social
So
media, absolutely.
Instagram has a mandatory 1 minute time limit on its video. So instead of being frustrated by that, how do you work with that? So I created a series called 5 Minutes With.
Hmm.
So it's 1 minute a day. And, I can interview the movers and shakers of the industry, do really compelling pieces. I also have a series called Cannabis Diaries where people just tell their story to the camera of their healing. And ultimately, when we get up to 20 or 30 or 50 of those, you're going to just be able to press to your pointer on the model of the human body where it hurts and hear somebody telling how they got healed right there.
That's terrific. What is your business model? You're here at a investment conference, raising awareness. Clearly, this is a growing industry in this country. What has been some of the feedback, and talk to us about the business model?
So first, like our design was really colorful and really playful, and I was expecting people to basically slap me down and tell me to, you know, get professional. And I've been shocked that I have not gotten that reaction one time. And I think that it shows you that people are looking maybe for something that's a little friendlier and a little warmer and fuzzier. And in this case in particular, what we're trying to build is a community that you can trust. Because, so we do sell CBD products that are legal in all 50 states. In our first incarnation, we sold a lot of different things that whatever, we just kind of put a ton of stuff up.
Mhm.
And then it became this real question of what are we endorsing? The responsibility kind of came into play. I've smoked cannabis for a long time, but I say anybody who's ever cleaned a cannabis pipe knows you don't necessarily want that in your body, you know? And I also know from talking to a lot of industry experts that what's in those vape pens, a lot of times you don't know,
Mhm.
you know? So what we've gone to with our redesign is a model that's strictly farm to body. And we're only going to sell products where you're going to meet the farmer, you're going to see how he raised his products,
Clever.
and all organic. And ultimately, I've heard horror stories now about how products that are famous are growing, about the chemicals that are used, about the insecticides, about the fungicides. Cannabis grows well, but it also, someone was saying today that it grows like a sponge, it'll absorb
Mhm.
everything. And so when I hear of plants that are growing being sprayed with really chemicals, there's a real problem that female plants tend to be hermaphrodites and turn back into males, and they spray them with this horrible pink goo to herm juice. And people are smoking that. People are smoking medical cannabis and taking that stuff in. So where
Mhm.
we kind of went back to is not to worry so much about the money and to worry about the quality and to be able
And
to
your partnerships as well, right?
exactly
Because you're partnering with
to
farmers and with some of the ethically responsible
and it even goes
players in the
beyond
space.
just the crop itself. It goes into regenerative farm practices. It goes into a higher mind, right? And the interesting thing about this cannabis space, so like in Massachusetts, they want social justice to be part of the rollout of the cannabis law. The communities that were most drastically negatively affected by the laws over the last 80 years, they say should be in front of the line to be able to benefit from that.
Mhm.
That's a beautiful idea, right? And many other states, New Jersey certainly, that's been part of the discussion. How can the communities that lost, so many of their young men to prison be
Right.
somehow
Affiliated.
just acknowledged in
Right.
some way,
Right.
right? Likewise, the idea that every cannabis arrest record would be completely expunged in every state.
Hmm.
In a way, it feels like no-brainers, but each one of these things has become a challenge in and of itself in each state. And so, like in our states, from Maine to Florida, each one is fighting in their own way, and those are all stories that we want to talk
Yeah,
about and cover.
a big part of your company is all the storytelling, and so explain how the platform works. You have a website and an Instagram community, and do you do individual events as well, or
So we are just kind of
Mhm.
getting to our feet, right? And we're two guys, right? We're, you know, I could pretend that we've got this whole world behind us, but what we got is a good idea and the ability to continue to make it happen.
And you're growing globally, I'm assuming,
You
given
know,
the
the
interest.
Instagram, it's fascinating where these people come from, and I also see but from a business model, it may well be that micro targeting directly to other groups might be the more profitable part of this. So what I see is that with each condition, for example, so like I worked with a lot of celebrities. There are celebrities who are well-known advocates of cannabis and certain to treat certain things. I'd like to work with them to
That's right.
talk to that particular community. I'd like to talk to, when I was out in Hawaii a few weeks ago shooting one of our suppliers, Mana Botanics, I met their organic turmeric guy, and he's an ex-pro surfer who now raises organic turmeric. Well, the surfing community is a
Right.
prime example of th- the internet gives us ways to rethink about who we're trying to reach and how we're trying to reach. Right now, what I just want to do is learn myself so that I can be a clear channel to send
To this
all this
community.
information out.
Absolutely. And I have to commend you because you have been someone that has clearly reinvented yourself numerous times across different industries. We talked about your career in the television industry as a producer, as a director. And what advice, just finally, would you have for entrepreneurs that are looking to really innovate and start a business in a different side of a business that they have experience in the trade, but in a different sector, I should say.
So to me, this is where your Renaissance mind question really hits, right? I was at a Women in Cannabis conference last weekend, and one woman brought up this very real thing that people don't talk about, right? Which is you have a good idea and you start to build a company, and then you come to a place like this, and they offer you some money, but then they kind of own your company.
Hmm.
And if you really want to, and so they would say, well, if how do you do it if you don't want to immediately have to dilute your ownership to such a drastic extent, or at least be able to dilute
Hmm.
it at a later point when perhaps you can get more for your buck? Well, the only reason why I can put out hundreds of hours of content by myself is because I have that skill set.
Right. And you're passionate about your mission and
But passion is a relatively easy thing to have, right? I would say everyone in that room is
of
passionate
course.
about their thing, right? But how are you going to pull it off? And the truth about everything is you don't know whether you can pull it off. So when I did Madonna's Behind the Music, For when I started the show, like in March, whatever it was, April, it was going to air on her birthday, which is August 20th. And there was if it was half a show, it was going to go on the air that day, right? It didn't really matter. And so you just have to get used to deadlines and pressure and being able to meet those challenges. And when you can't figure it out, figure a way around. And so mainly what I would say is learn how to do everything that's part of your game. If you have a website, learn how to make it all work. Don't have to call somebody to change something. You need to know how to change something, you know? And empower yourself. Every time you have to call somebody else to do something, you're giving away power as well as money.
Absolutely. Well, Jason, I think those are excellent words of advice. You truly are a Renaissance man in modern day, and I wish you and your company a lot of continued success. Look forward to being in touch.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.